Hello everyone and welcome to my second lesson. As promised, today we're going to look at IELTS writing task 1 for the academic exam. When you take task 1 of the academic exam, you will be asked to write 150 words and the recommended time is 20 minutes. You will be given some data to describe. It may be a table, a graph, a pie chart, a map, or a process, for example. I have put little examples of each here. So this is a line graph, this is a bar chart, a pie chart, a map, a process, and a table. If you look at this example, okay, so this is the example of a possible IELTS task 1 writing for the academic exam. You may be given two tables to compare. The tables usually have a title which tells you what the data in the tables represents. For example, these two tables represent the sales of fair trade labeled tea and bananas in 2001 and 2006. Fair trade, if you don't know what fair trade means, it's a way of dealing with developing country, maybe producers of goods like coffee, bananas or tea, and it's a way of ensuring, of making sure that the producers get a fair price, a good price for their products. Now, it's very important to quickly have a look at the data that you have and to look at the most important details here. So we see here that the 5 countries represented are in Europe, and we see here that we have 2 years. It's not a period of time, but 2 specific years. So we have 2001, 2006, and the numbers here are millions of euros. This here is a possible typical question for the task 1. Let me just delete the shadow here. So you can find questions like this. The tables above give information about fair trade sales of tea and bananas in 5 European countries in 2001 and 2006. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where appropriate. So here you have already a title that is a big help for your IELTS writing introduction. And then pay attention, you don't need to speak about every single number in the table, but you need to summarize. So you need to report and select the main features. So it doesn't need to be about every single number, but you need to look at what you think the main features are. Let's have a look at how you can start, for example. So here is again the task that you have. We can scroll down a little bit now. So it's very important, as I said in my introduction to the IELTS exam, my first video, it's very important that you know what the exam requires you to do. Now, you might be very good at reporting data, describing bar charts, but if you don't do what the examiners and the exam requires you to do, you will not get a high score. So very important, remember, you need to write 150 words at least. It's very important that you write an introduction where you repeat what the table shows, but do not use exactly the same words. It's also very important to include an overview. An overview means quickly saying in 1 or 2 sentences what the most important trend or the most important information in the table is. In this kind of task, you have 2 tables, so maybe paragraph 1, which should be the second paragraph after the introduction, could be about 1 table. Paragraph 3 could be a paragraph about the second table, and paragraph 4 could be a comparison between the two tables and some considerations. I want to have a look today mainly at the introduction. If you start well and if you know how to start, it's half the job done. So it's very important that you write an introduction that repeats what the table shows and doesn't use the same exact words that you find in the task. What they want to see is that you can use synonyms, similar words, and you can rephrase the words that you find in introduction. For example, in the introduction, all the words in the introduction are written in purple. So we have the tables above. Instead of repeating the tables above, you could write, for example, the data. Instead of give information, you could use the verb show. Instead of fair trade sales of tea and bananas, you could say how much tea and how many bananas were sold. And instead of in 5 European countries in 2001 and 2006, you could say in 5 countries in Europe in 2 given years. So this is what it might look like. The data show how much tea and how many bananas were sold in 5 countries in Europe in 2 given years. This is not the end of the introduction. This is a good introduction and it uses simple language, yes, but this is something that even lower intermediate students and intermediate students that normally have a band score 4.5 could easily do. Repeating, rephrasing, paraphrasing the introduction using synonyms. So look at the data carefully now. Now, as I said, it's important to write an overview. So straight after the introduction that we wrote in the previous slide, you will need to write a quick overview. So let's have a look at and highlight what you think, or what I think, the most important changes, the most important trends, and the most important features of these tables are. Okay, so if you're looking at tea in these countries, well, I notice, for example, that there's a big change in the UK. It went from 1.6 millions to 21 millions of euros. So I think this is a big feature that we can mention in the overview. We can see also that every country spent more money in 2006 compared to 2001 on tea. So from 1.6 to 21, from 3.5 to 7, this has doubled. A small increase, a big increase, and a small increase, but everything has increased, and that is an overview, a general trend of the table. What I can notice immediately here is in the bananas table is that not every country increased spending, or not every country sold more bananas in 2006 compared to 2001. I can see that Switzerland had a big increase, but if we look at Denmark, for example, or at Sweden, for example, we can notice that the numbers decreased. So this is something that I would like to mention in the overview, for example. So we can mention that the sales of tea increased, and we can mention that the sales of bananas also increased, except in 2 countries. So I have written it in this way. As we can see from the table, actually, if I can correct myself here, it's 2 tables, so I would put tables there. As we can see from the tables, fair trade tea sales have increased in all 5 countries, especially in the UK, while banana sales have decreased slightly in Denmark and Sweden, while they almost trebled in Switzerland. Now, I have kept it very simple because I believe that if you have a high level of English, you can do this more easily. But this is something very simple that even lower level students can learn to do. So if your English is not that great, you can still learn to look at the data and to find the main features to mention in the overview. Now, if I read this again, I also notice that I have used while twice. While is a conjunction, a linking word that I can use in IELTS to show something like a contrast. So maybe I'm going to change the second while. So as we can see from the tables, fair trade tea sales have increased in all 5 countries, especially in the UK, while banana sales have decreased slightly in Denmark and Sweden. Maybe I can say whereas they almost trebled in Switzerland. So it's something, together with the introduction that I wrote here, introduction, rephrasing the task, and the overview, so looking at the main features of the data represented. These will together make paragraph 1 of your IELTS writing. Now next time, why don't you try and give it a go? Why don't you try and write an IELTS task 1 for this task here. So the tables above give information about fair trade sales of tea and bananas in 5 European countries in 2001 and 2006. So why don't you try and do some writing, write a nice introduction and a few paragraphs. And if you need any feedback on your writing, you can send it to me. This is my email address, improveyourilts@gmail.com. And you can also look at my first video, which is the introduction to the IELTS exam, in my YouTube channel, IELTS Teacher, which is below there. Well, this is the end of writing task 1 for the academic IELTS first lesson, where I have shown you the introduction. Next time we can look at the paragraph bodies. So have a nice time and have a go at the writing, and I hope to receive your emails soon. Bye bye!